The alarm didn't beep. It screamed, not the soft ping that meant a loose sensor or a power fault in the lower decks. This was the red alarm, the one nobody on Station Veltha 9 had ever heard outside a drill, the kind of sound that stops your hands and widens your eyes. Officer Lyra Venn heard it first. She had been at her communications console for 6 hours straight, watching data streams roll across 3 screens. Nothing unusual. That was the job on a border station. You watched, you waited, you logged. Most of the time, nothing happened. But something was happening now. Her screen blinked red, a gravitational signature forming just beyond the outer sensor ring. She tapped it once. Twice. She assumed it was a glitch. The equipment on Veltha 9 misfired whenever the temperature dropped in the eastern wing. She had filed 7 maintenance reports last month. Nobody ever came. The blinking didn't stop. It accelerated. The pattern was evolving in real time. She leaned closer, pulled up the secondary overlay. Her stomach dropped. Captain Oren! She kept her voice level. She was trained to do that. You need to see this. Captain Dax Oren was already moving. 14 years on deep space border stations had taught him one thing above all else. When your comm officer uses that tone, calm on the surface, screaming underneath, you move fast. He crossed the bridge in 4 strides. He looked at the screen. He looked at Lyra. He looked at the screen again. A gravitational storm, forming fast, too fast, and right in the middle of it, spinning like a coin caught in a drain, was a mining vessel, the Solaris Prime, crew of 23, commercial operation. Standard route plan filed 48 hours ago. Low risk transit, clear sector, nothing to worry about, except now they were caught inside something that looked like a wound in space. The storm twisted and pulsed on the view screen, purple and black light bleeding into each other, folding and unfolding. The Solaris Prime rotated slowly inside it, engines dark, sparks bursting from the hull in small silent flashes. Metal was bending. Power readings were falling every second. Oren turned to the bridge. Battle stations, all personnel to posts. Lyra, emergency beacon, full spectrum, send it now. Her hands were already moving. The old protocol, 3 short pulses, 3 long, 3 short. The signal that had meant one thing for 200 years across 12 star systems. We need help. She sent it. She watched it travel outward across the display. The first relay caught it. The second relay caught it. And then the storm reached out, not physically but electromagnetically, and bent the signal path like a hand wrapping around a rope. The message bounced. It didn't reach the nearest colony. It didn't reach the emergency fleet at Outer Station 7. It didn't even reach the automated drone built to catch exactly this kind of overflow. It went the other way, deep, far, into the black region at the edge of every galactic map, the region marked in red on every navigation chart, labelled in a dozen languages with the same meaning, forbidden. Lyra's mouth went dry. She checked the transmission path a second time, then a third. Captain, Oren didn't look up from the storm data. What? The signal. She paused. It didn't reach the colonies. Silence. He turned slowly. She pointed at the display. The red line of the transmission path curved away from the friendly sectors, arcing deep into the black zone, the region that every species in the known galaxy agreed by unspoken law to leave alone, the region that no fleet had entered and returned from to describe, Deathworld's. Oren stared at the screen for a long moment. The crew had gone completely still. Even the machines seemed to hesitate. Tell me, that's a sensor error, he said quietly. Lyra shook her head. I checked 3 times, Captain. The storm interfered with the relay. The signal went through. All the way through. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Everyone in this part of the galaxy knew what the Deathworlders were. The stories had been passed around in bars, in briefing rooms, in quiet dormitory bunks between shifts. Nobody knew exactly what they looked like. Nobody had confirmed coordinates for their homeworld. Nobody knew how many of them existed. But the core facts were always the same. They came from a place so violent, so relentlessly hostile, that nothing else in the known galaxy could survive there for more than a few days. endless storms, radiation that would cook a standard humanoid in minutes, fauna that hunted in the complete dark, geological forces that remade the surface every generation, a world that should have killed everything. Instead, it produced something that couldn't be killed. Nobody had ever met a Death Welder and lived to write it down in a credible report. Some files said they were half machine. Some said they had modified themselves so many times that they barely counted as biological anymore. Some said they felt no pain. Some said they understood pain perfectly and had simply decided it was irrelevant. What everyone agreed on, they were out there, they were aware, and they had chosen to stay in their region and leave the rest of the galaxy alone. Until now, until Lyra Venn sent them an invitation. Orin exhaled slowly. He turned back to the main viewport where the Solaris Prime was still spinning in the dying storm. We deal with one problem at a time. Tow line configuration. Someone contact the nearest emergency fleet. Already tried, said Zara Cole from the navigation station. Young, barely 2 years on station, but sharp and steady. Right now she was doing a very good job of pretending to be fine. Storm is still jamming long-range comms. We're isolated. Oren nodded once. Then we figure this out ourselves. He said it like it was simple. The crew They moved, they worked, they didn't look at the black zone on the display, but Lyra looked. She kept watching that part of the screen, because she knew what she had done, and she knew that space doesn't lose messages. The storm faded 3 hours later. It collapsed the way those events always do, suddenly, completely, as if someone switched off a machine. One moment the void was twisting with energy, the next it was just dark and still and empty. The Solaris Prime drifted out of the dissipating field, hull scarred, engines cold. Emergency lights still glowing. Its crew was alive, shaken and badly rattled, but alive. The relief on Veltha 9 lasted exactly 47 minutes. That was when Lyra's screen blinked again. Different this time. Not red. Something outside every classification in the station's database. The system kept trying to categorize the energy reading and failing. Every category it attempted came back with no match. Not an asteroid, not a comet, not any natural phenomenon. Moving, fast, getting closer. Captain. She stood up. In 14 years of service, Lyra Venn had never stood to deliver a report. That was how Oren knew the scale of it before she said a word. Incoming contact. Origin the black zone? He came to stand beside her. The long-range sensors showed something too large and too dense to process properly. Then the mid-range sensors caught it, and the image sharpened, and every person on the bridge went quiet at once. It was a ship. No, that wasn't the right word. A ship is something built to travel. What was on that screen was something else. A fortress, a statement expressed in metal and force. The hull was black, not painted black, but genuinely black, the kind of black that absorbs light rather than reflects it. Cold blue energy traced lines across its surface like veins. It moved without visible engines, without exhaust, without the shimmer that faster-than-light drives produce. It moved like a living thing, patient, deliberate, silent. At its center, a symbol pulsed in faint blue light, a circle with 3 intersecting lines. Oren recognized it. He had read old classified intelligence files early in his military career, files most people never had clearance to access, files that had stayed with him ever since. "That's a Death Welder vessel," he said, quietly. Like saying it too loud would make things worse. Zara's voice came from behind him. They actually came. Oren's tone didn't change. Battle stations, weapons active, shields to full. Launch protocols for emergency evacuation. But hold, do not evacuate yet. He looked at Lyra. Can we outrun it? She shook her head slowly. It's already faster than anything we have, and it's not accelerating. It's already matched our position. Before anyone could respond, the communications console lit up. Incoming transmission, clean signal, structured, on the exact frequency of their original distress beacon. Lyra looked at Oren. He nodded. She opened the channel. A voice filled the room, human in its cadence, deep, male, completely level. No aggression, no warmth either, just precision. the voice of someone who had spent a very long time in places where emotion was an inconvenience. "This is Commander Marcus Reyes, the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We received your distress signal. We are here to assist." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Orin was the first one to find his voice. He stepped forward to the comm console and pressed the transmit key himself.
"Commander Reyes.
This is Captain Dax Orin, Station Veltha 9. We appreciate the response." A pause. He chose the next words carefully. "We were not aware that our signal had reached your sector." A brief silence on the other end. Not the silence of a communication delay. The kind of silence that means someone is deciding how much to say. "Your signal reached a long way, Captain. We were in the area." Lyra caught Orin's eye. "In the area. The Black Zone. Nobody was just in the area out there." Orin kept his voice even. "The crew of the Solaris Prime requires medical assistance and hull repairs. We have a salvage team standing by. We don't want to take up your time." "Your salvage team is not equipped for what we're seeing on the Solaris Prime's hull." Another pause. "We'd like to send a team aboard the station for a direct conversation." The bridge went cold, not literally, but every person on it felt something drop in their chest. Orin looked at his crew. Zara stared at him with wide eyes. Invoked. The chief engineer, a stocky man with grease permanently embedded in the creases of his knuckles, was very slowly shaking his head. Orin pressed the key again. "How many personnel?" "3, including myself. 3 Deathwalders aboard Veltha 9. Orin thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. Then, "Docking Bay 7 is open. Approach vector is clear. Welcome aboard, Commander." He released the key. Vogt walked up beside him and dropped his voice to a murmur. "Captain, with respect, have you lost your mind?" "Probably," Orin said calmly. "But they came when we called. That counts for something." Docking Bay 7 was the oldest part of the station. The metal was older here, the lights slightly dimmer, the whole space carrying the particular smell of machinery that had been running for decades. It felt, Lyra thought, like the wrong place to meet something out of legend. She stood with Orin, Zara, and Vogt in a line. 4 people in station uniforms, 4 sets of shoulders squared and chins up, doing their best to look like they were not afraid. The Deathwelder shuttle was smaller than the warship, but larger than anything in Veltha 9's own docking inventory. It set down with a precision that was almost unsettling. No bump, no drift correction, no scraping adjustment. Perfect contact on first approach. The ramp descended. 3 figures walked out. They looked human, mostly. That was the first thing Lyra registered. 2 men and 1 woman, in dark grey tactical gear. There was neither quite uniform nor quite armour. Something between the two, designed for function first and identification never. They moved well. Too well. The kind of movement that comes not from training, but from a lifetime in environments where hesitation costs you everything. The one in front was Commander Marcus Reyes. He was tall, not exceptionally, but the way he carried himself made the height more present. Short dark hair, close cropped, dark eyes that swept the bay in one continuous motion. Not nervously, not aggressively, just cataloguing. The way a person looks at a room when they've spent years never knowing what was in the next room. He stopped in front of Orin and extended a hand. A human gesture, deliberate. Orin shook it. "Commander."
"Captain."
Reyes's grip was firm, but not crushing. He nodded to Lyra, to Zara, to Vogt. "Thank you for allowing us aboard." He said it like he meant it, not performatively. Like courtesy was a tool he used with precision. "We're grateful for the response," Orin said. "Shall we move somewhere more comfortable?" Reyes glanced at the 2 people behind him. The woman, short, watchful, carrying herself with the stillness of someone who is almost never surprised, gave the smallest nod. The second man, broader, with a scar that ran from his left jawline into his collar, simply waited. "The bay is fine," Reyes said. "What we need to discuss doesn't need to be comfortable, it needs to be fast." Orin felt the air change. He kept his expression neutral. "All right." Reyes looked at him directly. Your signal didn't just reach us. The frequency the storm pushed it into, that's a contact band, not a standard distress band. It's the frequency used to initiate formal communication with the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. Lyra blinked. We didn't know that. I understand that. Reyes nodded. The storm modified the transmission characteristics. It wasn't your error, but the result is the same. The signal was received and logged as a formal contact request, which means this meeting is now officially on record. A pause. For both sides, Oren processed that. He kept his voice steady. And what does that mean for us? Reyes looked at him for a moment before answering. It means that for the first time in a very long time, someone from your side of the line and someone from ours are standing in the same room. And that doesn't happen accidentally.
Not anymore.
Behind him, Lyra felt Zara take a quiet breath. This was not a rescue operation, this was something else entirely. They moved to the station's briefing room, smaller and better lit. The round table helped. Nobody sat at a head. Nobody was above anyone else. It made things feel, if not equal, at least acknowledged. Reyes sat across from Oren. The woman with him, she had given her name as Sable, just Sable, no rank offered, sat at his right. The scarred man, who had said nothing and been introduced simply as Tor, stood near the door with his arms at his sides and his eyes on the middle distance. The Solaris Prime, Reyes began. The storm damage to its hull isn't just structural. There are energy imprints in the outer plating that your repair teams won't be able to identify. They'll attempt standard patch procedures, and the plating will hold for about 11 days. Oren straightened slightly. After 11 days, the imprint destabilizes. The affected sections will fail at once. Multiple ruptures simultaneously. Reyes said it without drama, like he was reading off a maintenance schedule. The crew will have 6 to 8 minutes of... Not enough to evacuate all 23. Lyra felt a chill move through her that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. You can fix it? Oren asked. Reyes turned to Sable. She opened a small equipment case. Inside, a set of tools that Lyra didn't recognize. Dense, compact, with components that seemed to shift slightly as the light caught them. We can neutralize the imprint, Sable said. Her voice was low and measured. It requires access to the engine compartment and the external plating on sections C through F. Done, Oren said immediately. He looked at Vogt. Vogt nodded and left the room to coordinate. Reyes watched this exchange without expression. Then, there's a second issue, Captain. Of course there was. The gravitational storm that your sector experienced wasn't a natural event. Silence. Oren's jaw tightened very slightly. You're saying someone made it. Something made it, Reyes said. The Solaris Prime was in the wrong place. It wasn't targeted. But the entity that generated that event was using your sector as a testing ground, a calibration run. He paused. We've seen this before, in 6 other sectors over the past 2 years. Zara spoke up from the side of the table. What entity? Reyes looked at her. A long look. Like he was deciding how much of the truth was useful versus how much was simply terrifying. We call it the Forge, he said. It has other names in other languages. All of them mean roughly the same thing, the thing that unmakes and rebuilds. It's old. Much older than any current civilization we know of. It doesn't communicate in a way we can decipher. It doesn't appear to be aware of individual beings. But it moves through sectors systematically, and where it goes, the physics of space becomes unstable. The room was very quiet. Why is it here? Oren asked. That, Reyes said, is what we need to figure out. Together, he said, the last word with the weight of something that had taken him a long time to say. Together, what do you think the Forge really is? What is it building or destroying? Write your thoughts in the comments, because this story is about to go somewhere none of us expected. The next 12 hours on Veltha 9 had a strange quality to them. Not calm exactly, more like the silence between 2 sounds. Sable and a second technician worked in the Solaris Prime's engine compartment without stopping, their unfamiliar tools doing things that Vogt watched carefully and understood only in parts. The scarred man Tor sat in the docking bay for the entirety of those 12 hours and didn't ask for anything. He wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. He simply existed there, present and still, in a way that made the station's junior staff walk past the bay door quickly and not linger. Oren and Reyes sat with the data. Reyes had transferred files from the Expeditionary Fleet's records, compressed, heavily redacted in places, but containing enough to build a picture. 6 sectors, 6 events. Each one a gravitational distortion of growing intensity, appearing for between 2 and 9 hours, leaving energy imprints on anything that passed through it. The 6th event had been larger than the first 5 combined. Velthanine's storm was the 7th. It's escalating, Oren said. Not a question. Every event is larger than the last, and the interval between them is decreasing. Reyes turned a screen toward him, a timeline, red marks, each one closer to the next. We think we have between 4 and 7 weeks before the next event, based on the intervals, and the next event will be larger than this one. Significantly, Orange studied the map. The 7 red marks, the pattern they made, something about the spacing looked almost deliberate to him, though he couldn't articulate why. What does it want? If it isn't aware of individual beings, does it have a destination, a target? Reyes was quiet for a moment. We've been working on that question for 2 years. Sable's theory is that it isn't moving toward anything, it's looking for something. A specific resonance, or a configuration of matter, or something we don't have a name for yet. When it finds it, the testing stops. And when the testing stops, Reyes looked at the map. We don't know. In the previous 6 events, the after effects dissipated without further incident. But the scale has never been like this before. The 7th event, he paused. The 7th is different. How? Reyes turned the screen again. A new image. The energy signature from the storm, analyzed and mapped in layers. Lyra had seen the raw data from her console. This version of it was structured, decoded, in ways her equipment couldn't manage. The pattern in the center of the storm, when rendered this way, looked like... She wasn't sure what it looked like. Not random, not natural, something that had a logic to it, even if the logic was alien. The 7th event left a marker, Reyes said. An energy signature embedded in this sector, deep, below the standard detection threshold for most equipment. He looked at Oren. It marked this location. We think it's planning to come back. Lyra heard herself say, "Why here?" Reyes turned to her. For the first time, something moved in his expression, not quite uncertainty, but close. That is the question we came here to answer. They found the answer 3 days later, and it came from the last place any of them expected. It came from the Solaris Prime. Sable had finished the hull treatment. The imprint was neutralized, the plating stabilized, the crew of the mining vessel cleared to begin emergency repairs. During the process, Sable had run a full deep scan of the ship's cargo hold, standard procedure when treating storm-imprinted vessels, to check for embedded resonance signatures in the material being transported. She came to the briefing room with a look on her face that Lyra had not seen on her before. Not alarm, something quieter than alarm, something closer to recognition. The Solaris Prime was carrying ore, Sable said. Standard industrial haul. Iron composite, processed granite, trace heavy metals. She set a datapad on the table. And this? An image, a fragment of material, roughly the size of a fist, irregular edges, dull grey-black surface, unremarkable to look at. This wasn't in the cargo manifest, Sable said. The crew doesn't know where it came from. Best guess is it was inside a larger ore sample that got processed and broken down during transit, and this fragment separated. It's been in the hold for approximately 8 months. What is it? Oren asked. Sable looked at Reyes. Reyes looked at the image for a moment. We call it anchor material, he said. It's extremely rare. In our records we have encountered it exactly twice before. It's a type of matter that exists in a quantum state that bridges two different energy frames simultaneously. It doesn't behave like normal matter under electromagnetic stress. He paused. Under the kind of electromagnetic stress a gravitational storm produces, anchor material resonates loudly across a very large distance. Lyra understood it before he finished. She could see it assembling in front of her. The storm wasn't testing this sector. It was following the Solaris Prime. The fragment on board was resonating. The storm was homing in on it. Yes, Reyes said. And when the storm ended and the ship was still here, the marker was left in this sector because the fragment is still here. He looked at the image. The forge isn't looking for a location. It's looking for this material. The room was silent for a long time. Vogt spoke first. He had a talent for arriving at the practical center of any situation faster than anyone else. So we get it off the station, we put it on a ship, we fly it somewhere empty, and we draw the next event away from populated space. That's one option, Reyes said. What's the other option? Reyes was quiet. Sable looked at the datapad. Neither of them answered immediately. Oren looked between them. Commander, what's the other option? Reyes exhaled through his nose, a quiet, controlled breath. The kind you take when you are about to say something that has been true for a long time and has not yet been said out loud. The other option, he said, is that we use the fragment, deliberately. We allow the forge to find it, but we control the conditions under which that happens. Vogt frowned. Use it how? As bait? Not bait, a key. Reyes looked at Oren. In the data from the previous 6 events, there's a pattern we've been analyzing for 18 months. At the peak of each event, for a window of approximately 4 minutes, the entity's energy field becomes coherent, not chaotic, structured. In those 4 minutes, it appears to be receptive, as the closest word we have. Not passive, not dangerous, something between. Receptive to what? Lyra asked. To communication, Reyes said. He said it simply, without ceremony. Like the most extraordinary sentence possible in this context could be delivered in a flat, calm voice. Another silence, longer this time. You want to talk to it, Oren said. We want to try. The window has never been used before. Every previous event was responded to with evacuation shutdown distance. Nobody stayed close enough during the peak phase to attempt contact. We never had the fragment before, and we never had a 7th event. The pattern in our data suggests the 7th is the convergence point. After 7, the sequence resets. We lose the window, potentially forever. Lyra looked at the fragment on the datapad, dull grey-black, fist-sized, something that had spent 8 months in a cargo hold without anyone knowing it was the most important object in this sector of the galaxy. And you need our station, Oren said. We need your location, Reyes said. The marker is here. The next event will be centered here. You have the fragment. And you are already on record as the first formal contact between your civilization and ours in over a century, he put. This is not a small thing, Captain. I want to be honest with you about what I'm asking. Oren looked at him. You're asking us to be here when it comes back. Yes. With the fragment.
Yes.
And attempt to communicate with something that has been dismantling the physics of space across 6 sectors for 2 years.
Reyes didn't blink.
Yes. Oren leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked at his crew. Lyra, Zara, Vogt. Each of them looking back at him, each of them waiting. He looked at Reyes. Tell me everything you know about the 4-minute window. The days that followed were the strangest of Lyra's life. Working alongside the Deathwelders was nothing like the stories. They did not stalk the corridors in silence, or unsettle the equipment with their presence, or make the lights flicker. They worked. They ate different food than the station crew, self-contained rations they had brought aboard, but they ate. Tor fixed a power coupling in the secondary engineering bay on his 2nd day without being asked, and did it correctly, and handed Vogt the connector when he was done with a nod. Provoked, stared at him for a full 2 seconds, and then nodded back. Sable spent most of her time with the fragment. She had built a containment field around it. Small, elegant, using components from the expeditionary shuttle that hummed at a frequency just below hearing. She monitored it continuously. She slept in 4-hour intervals on a cot she had placed 10 meters from the containment field. Reyes briefed the full crew on the 4th day. He stood at the center of the briefing room and explained, clearly, directly, without softening anything, what the next event was likely to look like. The intensity of the storm, the window, the plan, what they needed everyone on station to do during the 4 minutes. The crew listened. Some of them looked frightened. A few of them looked like they had passed through frightened and come out somewhere quieter on the other side. When Reyes finished, a junior technician in the back raised her hand. Her name was Pell. She was 22 years old. She had been on Veltha 9 for 7 months. "If this works," she said, "if we actually communicate with it, what do we say?" Reyes looked at her. A long moment. "We haven't decided. We know the medium. We don't know the message yet." Pell considered that. "Can I make a suggestion?" "Yes." "We ask it to stop." A pause. Then Reyes said, "That's exactly what we were going to say." The event came on the 18th day after the Solaris Prime drifted out of the first storm. No warning this time, no gradual build on the sensors. It appeared fully formed at the edge of the sector, already massive, already moving with purpose. The sensors screamed. Every reading on every console spiked into red simultaneously. Oren's voice cut through the noise, all stations. "This is it. Everyone follows protocol." Lyra, containment field status.
Online.
Fragment is active. Resonance building. Lyra's hands moved across the board. The containment field around the fragment was pulsing visibly now, the hum it produced shifting upward in frequency, crossing the threshold of hearing. A faint, clear tone, steady and bright, like a signal fire in the dark. Reyes was at the station's main console, standing beside Oren. Sable was with the fragment. Tor was in the docking bay, hands-free, waiting. On the main viewport, the storm grew. It was larger than the first one, much larger. The colors were different this time. Deeper, more layered, purple giving way to a blue so dark it was almost black, and within the dark blue, threads of white light that moved with something approaching intention. 15 minutes to peak phase, Zara said from navigation. Her voice was absolutely steady. She had decided somewhere in the past 18 days that she was going to be steady, and she had kept to that decision. Fragment resonance at 60%, Lyra said. The storm moved closer. The station shuddered. Not violently, just a low trembling, a vibration that you felt in your feet and in your back teeth. The lights adjusted automatically. The hull gave a long, low groan as the electromagnetic pressure built against it. Resonance at 75%. Reyes spoke quietly beside Oren. "When the peak phase begins, we have approximately 4 minutes. The communication protocol requires the fragment's resonance to be at full amplitude and the transmission signal to be sent on the Forge's own frequency. Sable will initiate the moment she confirms the window is open." Oren nodded once. "And if it doesn't work, then we seal the fragment in a deep containment pod and the expeditionary shuttle takes it as far from here as our drives can reach before the storm overtakes us." "How far can you get in 4 minutes?" Reyes said nothing. That was his answer. "Resonance at 90%, Lyra said. The white threads in the storm were everywhere now, filling the viewport, moving in patterns that felt less and less like chaos with every second, like something vast was writing in a language that nobody had learned yet. 1 minute to peak. The room was very quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't silence. The consoles were running, the systems were active, every person on the bridge was breathing, but nobody spoke, nobody moved unnecessarily. They had done everything they could to prepare, now they were here. "Peak phase," Zara said. "Window is open. Sable's voice came through the comm from the fragment bay, resonance at full amplitude. Fragment is transmitting, signal is live, and then the storm changed. Not in the way that storms change, not a shift in intensity or a change in direction. Something more fundamental. The motion of the white threads paused, not stopped, paused the way a person pauses when they hear something unexpected. Then the threads began to move differently, gathering, focusing toward the station. Oren felt the urge to say something and control. This was not the moment for words from him. The transmission went out on the forge's frequency. Sable had built the message over 18 days, working with Reyes, working with data from 6 previous events, working with the fragment's own resonance patterns as a template. It was not in any human language. It was not in any language. It was a pattern, a mirror of the patterns the forge itself produced, structured to carry meaning the way a gesture carries meaning, without requiring shared vocabulary. It said, "We are here. We are small. We are asking you to see us." 4 minutes. Lyra watched the screen. The white threads had formed a shape in the storm that made no geometric sense, but felt somehow like attention. The storm was looking at them, not at the station, not at the sector, at them. 2 minutes. The fragment in the bay was vibrating at a frequency audible throughout the station now, a clear, resonant tone that moved through the metal of the walls and floor and seemed to carry the same quality as the white threads in the storm, like 2 instruments playing the same note. 1 minute. Then the storm answered. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a visual signal on any screen. It was something that Lyra could only describe afterward, when she tried to find words for it, as a feeling of scale. Like suddenly understanding, in your body rather than your mind, how large the universe actually is, how long it has existed, how many things it contains that no living being has ever named. It wasn't frightening. It was simply enormous. The storm began to contract. Not collapsing, pulling back deliberately, like something withdrawing its hand from a surface it has decided not to press on. The energy readings fell in a smooth, controlled curve. The white threads dimmed. The pressure against the hull eased. Window closed. Zara exhaled. Storm is retreating. All readings declining, sector pressure returning to baseline. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Vogt, from the engineering station, said, "Did that work?" Sable's voice through the comm. "The fragment has gone dormant. Resonance is 0. The marker signal from the sector has cleared." A pause. I think it received the message. A longer pause. Reyes turned to Oren. There was something in his expression that Lyra had not seen there before. Not triumph, not relief, something quieter. The expression of someone who has worked for a very long time toward a single moment and is now very carefully allowing themselves to acknowledge that the moment happened. "The marker is gone," he said. "The forge has moved on. Think about what just happened in this room, in this story. A signal accidentally sent across the boundary of the known galaxy. A creature older than civilization. 4 minutes. And the simplest message possible: we see you. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you think the forge understood, or is this just the beginning?" They spent the next 2 days in debrief, not the formal kind. Veltar 9 didn't have the equipment or the staff for formal debrief procedures at this scale. It was more like a conversation that kept resuming, at the console, over food, in the narrow corridor between the briefing room and the engineering bay. Reyes and Oren talking, Lyra and Sable talking. Vogt and Tor, who had developed a working relationship entirely through shared technical gestures and the occasional grunt of professional acknowledgement. Zara sat with Reyes for 3 hours on the second day, asking him about the expeditionary fleet, about the world they came, about how they lived. She asked careful questions, thoughtful questions, the kind that showed she had been thinking about asking them for a long time. Reyes answered, not everything. There were things he couldn't share, and he said so directly rather than deflecting. But he answered more than Lyra had expected. He talked about the world he had grown up on, the fleet that had become his family, the 2 years spent tracking the forge across 6 sectors. He talked about the mission without making it sound like a legend. It sounded like work. Hard, patient, costly work. On the morning of the 3rd day, Reyes came to Oren's office. He didn't sit. He stood near the viewport and looked at the sector for a moment before speaking. "We'll be leaving today," he said. The forge's retreat seemed stable, no secondary signatures in the sector. "The fragment is dormant. Your crew is safe." Oren nodded. He had expected this. "What happens now?" Reyes turned from the viewport. "We file a report. The contact is on record, your station, this date, this event." "That's significant, Captain. It won't disappear. People on both sides of the line are going to read that record." "Will that change anything?" A pause. "I think it already has." Oren looked at him. "The signal was an accident. Yes, most of the important ones are." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Oren extended his hand. Reyes shook it. "Thank you for coming," Oren said. "You didn't have to." Reyes held his gaze. "The signal went to our contact band. Protocol says we respond." He paused. "But between you and me, Captain, we would have come anyway." An hour later, the Death Worlder vessel lifted away from Veltha 9's docking ring with the same perfect silence with which it had arrived. No exhaust, no thruster flare, just a weight that was there and then wasn't. Lyra watched it go from her console. She tracked it on the long-range sensors as it moved away from the station, away from the sector, back toward the edge of the mapped galaxy, back toward the black zone on every chart. She watched until the sensor signature faded below detection threshold. Then she looked at the sector around the station. Clear, stable, quiet. The same dark field she had stared at for 6 hours, every shift for years. It looked different now, not in any way she could point to on a screen. The stars, the energy readings were what they always were. The background radiation was nominal, but she knew, in a way she hadn't known before, that the quiet wasn't emptiness. It was a space full of things that hadn't introduced themselves yet. Full of things that were old and large, and, if you managed to say the right thing in the right moment, possibly willing to listen. Zara came to stand beside her. "Are you going to write it up?" "I have to," Lyra said. "It's a contact event. It goes in the log." "How do you describe it?" Lyra thought about that for a moment. She thought about the fragment, the storm, the 4 minutes, the feeling of scale that had moved through the station walls, the expression on Reyes's face when it worked. "Carefully," she said. She sat down at her console and began to type. In the official log of Station Veltha 9, filed on day 241 of the current calendar year, under the classification heading of Anomalous Contact Event, she wrote, "At 0314 station time, the sector experienced a gravitational disturbance of unknown origin. The civilian mining vessel, Solaris Prime, was caught in the event and sustained damage, crew recovered intact." Subsequent investigation in collaboration with Terran Expeditionary Fleet personnel identified the source of the disturbance as a non-biological, non-mechanical entity of significant scale and unknown age, hereafter designated Forge 7 in sequence. Communication was attempted using resonance-based signal protocol during a 4-minute peak phase window. The entity demonstrated apparent reception of the communication signal and withdrew from the sector without further incident. The sector marker left by the entity is cleared. She paused. "Read it back." Then she added one more line. "No casualties, no aggression, contact confirmed. She saved the file. She flagged it for transmission to the nearest colony hub, to the Emergency Fleet Command at Outer Station 7, to the Standing Committee on Deep Space Anomalies. To everyone who needed to know that something had happened here." Then she sat back in her chair and looked at the dark field on her screen. Somewhere out there, the Death Worlder vessel was moving through the black zone, moving back toward a world nobody on this side of the line had ever seen. Back toward Marcus Reyes' home, and Sable's, and Tor's, who had fixed a power coupling without being asked and handed Vogt the connector with a nod. And somewhere much farther out, farther than the sensors reached, farther than any map went. Something enormous and ancient and full of white light was moving through space, moving on, for now. But Lyra knew what she had sent into that storm. And she knew that sending a message and being heard were not the same as being finished. The sector was quiet, the signals were not.